Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. When I logged on real quick and saw that there were already people waiting for the stream to start, I was humbled and honored. So, I mean, people are actually like, "Wow, we're showing up. His ass better be on time." Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And let's see here. All right. So I'm still getting a little bit set up, getting my iPad set up. So hopefully I can. Hello, Sage Empress. Good morning. Well, I'm not sure what time zone you're in, but hello. That's one of the things I was thinking about. The fact that some people in Australia actually, I posted last night that I was going to be on, and they were like, yeah, so it's going to be 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And he's like, "Well, what is that Australian time?" And I'm like, I looked it up, and it was like 4:30 in the morning, and I was like, I feel horrible about that. So, in the future, I'm going to start. I'm going to be experimenting. How's it going, Chris? What's up? I'm going to be experimenting with alternating between doing live streams in mornings and then afternoons. That way, hopefully, no matter when I'm doing it, someone will be getting it at a normal time. Because if people around the world are watching, which I'm very flattered by, that means someone's always going to be getting screwed. So let me show you what I've got going on here. My drawing table is a little bit of a mess, but that's because I've got multiple layers of reference. So shout out to Brooklyn. Actually, my brother used to live in Park Slope. I haven't been out there in a while though. But I was born actually in Long Island, and I was born in West Hempstead. But my family moved when I was like 4 years old, so I always joke that you can't really claim the East Coast unless you stay there at least through middle school. So anyway, artwork. So I'm working on the latest issue of my comic Morningstar. Ah, some UK folks showing up. Thanks. My latest issue of my comic Morningstar. And for those of you who are new to the stream, the story is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, but it's told as a western. Now, the artwork that I have laying on my table, I have a book, Ken Holtgren's The Art of Animal Drawing. And the reason why I have this is because the opening sequence of this issue starts with a deer. Now, these are all flipped because the way I tend to do my layouts is I draw them in red pencil on one side, and then as opposed to flipping my drawings in Photoshop, these are drawn on vellum. So, it's a slightly thicker than tracing paper. So it's as durable as copy paper, but it's translucent like tracing paper. So then instead of flipping it in Photoshop, I flip it on the actual paper, and then I make corrections on the back. And these are basically my rough pencils, which I scan in, print on a board in ink. Now, I still feel like I have a whole lot of study to do to get better at drawing animals. I've got several reference books on it. Occasionally, I take trips to the local zoo to study and do some live animal drawing. And I found that going to the Natural History Museum and drawing taxidermied animals is extremely helpful because the animals aren't moving. That said, the opening sequence of this issue starts off with a deer in the forest coming out to a river to take a drink. And I said, well, I need some reference for deer. So that's the animal drawing book. So my table, when I say my table's a mess, I've got the pages that I'm working on vellum. I've got pages 1 through 3 done so far. I'm going to start working on page 4. I've got the animal drawing book. I have my thumbnails, which I drew in ink previously. So I've got all those stacked in here. And somewhere on a table next to me is my actual script. So that's usually the stuff that I have spread out on my table all at one time while I'm working. And do not be surprised if at some point while I'm working, one of these things slips off of the table. In fact, I'm going to try and put a binder clip on the edge of my drawing table to keep anything from slipping off. But yeah, some stuff may slip off here. So let me. Sorry, I'm trying to stay close to the microphone so you can continue to hear me as I'm working. I have to pull out my the page for my template for page 4. Let's see. All right. Here we go, page 4. So when I say my template, let me show you exactly what I mean. And again, some of you may be very familiar with this if you've seen other videos I've posted. For some of you, this may be brand new, so I just want to explain to you what the hell I'm doing. So after I write my script and my outline for an issue, what I usually do is I go through and I draw thumbnails of the entire issue. And that's what this stack of ink drawings is. Let me pull out the next page here. There we go. Put page 3 away, page 4 up here. And my thumbnails are kind of, whoops, binder clip making a break for it. Ugh. My thumbnails are a little bit abstract in the sense that I'm kind of building a page as opposed to just simply sketching out an idea. I start out with an idea basically of how many panels I want on the page and the general structure. And then once I figure out the overall composition of the page, so it's having 3 tiers, and then the bottom tier having 3 panels, the top tier having 1 large one, I may decide, make notes about how much wider or taller I want the actual panel to be, like the different tiers to be. And then I tend to go in and draw a lot of variations of what I want individual panels to be. And there's not necessarily an order to this, except for the fact that sometimes I'll start from the last panel and work backwards, or I'll start with the panel that's the largest and kind of build the images around it. But I try to figure out what's gonna be a logical order of sequences, and I may try doing a version like you can look, this is the same action, this panel and this panel, but I'm experimenting with which way I'm going to have the character facing, depending on what details I've worked out in the other panel. So that eventually it all kind of flows. So my layouts are very stream of conscious. So I have to put numbers in there and notes to help me remember what exactly it is I'm trying to explain, where I decide to flip different panels. It's a little bit of a mishmash. Once I finish that, for the entire issue, then I go through with my outline, and I will letter in Adobe Illustrator. I'll create frames with the basic panel layouts that I've worked out in my thumbnails, and then I will actually letter it with rough lettering. And there's not a whole lot of dialogue in this because these are the deer that comes out in the first issue that's drinking from the water gets pursued by these demons that are sort of starving and weak and defeated from events in the previous issue. And they're sort of the villains of the creature of the series. Well, Lucifer really is the main villain of the series. But these demons are, yeah, definitely a second negative force in the series. And so they're kind of weak and drained. They're pursuing this deer because they're starving, they're weak, and they're just trying to get food. And I thought it was an interesting way to open the series with something a little bit quiet and peaceful, because this is sort of the issue. This is the second to last issue of the series. It's an 8-issue series, and right now I'm doing issue 7. And this is where things are starting to really go off the rails before like the big final conflict. So I thought, why not start with something kind of peaceful and quiet? And actually, you haven't spent that much time with the demons. So kind of a moment to see them in probably the most empathetic light you're ever going to see them in the series before things really start turning awful. And I think that's something I think about a lot in terms of writing, is how to create empathetic villains. You know what? I do have a video. I see Epic Trilogy. I do have a video on my lettering method. And if you go through my my YouTube channel, and if you search the channel for lettering, you'll see at least one, if not 2 other videos of that. Okay. So, all right. I think that I will put the deer book to the side, and I'll just pick it up if I need it. and then just try to focus on just the layouts, my thumbnails, and the layouts for now. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, Epic Trilogy said that he also needs help with digital, so he wanted to check out the video on lettering. Lettering in Illustrator, I mean, I do respect people that do hand lettering with comics because it's a disappearing craft and it looks very beautiful. But just for the needs of modern day comic book production, in terms of being able to work quickly, being able to make a lot of revisions and changes, which for me, lettering is part of the writing process because I tend to do a first draft when I'm actually writing my outline. I revise that draft when I'm actually lettering the comic. Then when I'm actually assembling the page, after I've penciled and inked, I'm putting it together. That's another third pass. So as I'm putting the pages in, I'll go in and I'll tweak the dialogue. And even when I'm doing my gray toning in Photoshop, I'm always going in and tweaking it. So working in Illustrator has become very much a necessity for me. And Illustrator is not necessarily the friendliest program. It can be very counterintuitive. But I mean, there's a lot of really good books. I believe that I'm trying to think of what it is. I think it's called it has WoW in the title, but there's a book called Adobe WoW or Illustrator WoW. Wow, I can't remember the exact title. WoW is in it, but they have a series of books that like on Photoshop, on Illustrator, on all the Adobe products, and that book was the one that taught me the most about how to actually manipulate the program to get to do what I want to do. Before I start here, hang on a second, because I'm just trying to get the chat to pull up on my iPad on the side, so I don't have to keep looking up at my phone, which I'm using to actually stream this video from. Let's see here. All right. Yeah. All right. I just had to make sure that it was muted because I don't want you guys to. There we go. All right. It's muted. Now. Now, see, that's the thing that's driving me crazy. Sometimes when I have the stream running on my iPad, I can see the chat. Sometimes it is not running. Yeah, oh, there we go. All right, so let's get into this. Let's draw some comics. And if you happen to have questions as I'm going along and I don't answer them in the chat, please feel free to repost the questions in the chat. Because I'm drawing at the same time, there's definitely things I may miss. I may miss comments, or I may just be sitting here on a ramble and answering some other questions, and I may forget to come back to it. So if you ask a question and I don't get to it, please repost it, and I will try to keep an eye on the chat while I'm working, and make sure that I reply to those. So it is a little bit challenging to sort of talk and draw and be monitoring these things at the same time. Okay. So on the page before this, that's one of the things. I try to keep the page I just drew close at hand so I can kind of look at it and refer to what's going on. So there's a deer running through the forest, top speed. It's already been chased. It's already been scratched at or clawed up when it narrowly avoided being attacked by one of the demons. This other demon bursts out of the brush. Even though it's going in the reverse direction, it's probably easier to see what's going on looking at the graphite corrected side. Again, this is what I end up scanning into Photoshop. I turn it to a light blue color, kind of a non-photo blue. Print that on a large 11 by 17 inch Bristol board. That's sort of the American standard comic book size. I print that on Bristol board in light blue, and then I ink directly on it. So I go from thumbnails to rough layouts. I wouldn't really consider these finished pencils. I mean, I know inkers who could ink from something this loose, but I really don't feel like, to me, these don't feel like finished pencils. They're not as tight as they should be in my mind. Unless you're working with a finisher, an artist who doesn't just come in and is trying to be as faithful to the ink penciler's line as possible, but somebody who actually comes in and they're adding their own style and they're bringing their artwork to completion. If you're working with somebody who actually does finishes on your work, then yeah, this would probably be fine. Like I would consider that. But for me, this feels like this is looser than what I would give somebody else if somebody else were inking me. And again, I still feel like I'm working out my own artistic style, which is why I prefer to ink myself, because I'm still figuring out exactly what I want out of the finished work. And I feel like it would be bad for him to collaborate with someone if I can't actually describe them what I want from it, because that's part of being a good collaborator is knowing what you want and being able to express that to the other person, and then they can say, yes, I can do this, or no, I can't, or this is why that's a bad idea, and there can be a back and forth and a dialogue. Knowing what you want out of the work is very key to being able to collaborate with somebody, which is why I tend to do everything myself. I'm always figuring it out. All right. So again, this page is flipped. Deer running top speed, demon popping out of the brush. And in this panel, which is a little bit of an awkward panel, and we'll see how it reads in the actual page, but the idea is that I'm trying to convey in this small panel, like I went large with the kind of the explosive large creature popping out. The deer kind of ducks up underneath this weird demon that has like two heads as like a large, like more quadruped-like creature, and then it has like another more humanoid demon coming out of the back. And it's just something I thought I hadn't done as many weird body types with the creatures as are possible in this type of fantasy story. So I thought, why not start experimenting with them, doing some weird shit with their bodies? So anyway, it's sort of like the deer kind of ducks underneath its legs now because it's terrified and it's trying to figure out how to escape. Then as it ducks underneath, we now go into a reverse shot, and the demon turns as trying to chase it and bite its ass off as it's running now at the viewer. And the way I have it set up, there will be a large sound effect right in between where the demon's teeth clack shut, and the deer's tail just sort of scooting away from it. So that's what came before. Pardon me for a second. I need to just move away from the phone and clear my throat. I've been kind of getting over a cold the past week. So that's really gross. I'm probably going to do it a few times over the course of the video. I apologize for it. But, the thumb's got to come up. Let's see, I saw a question there. And thank you for the comments about liking how it's looking. Let's see. How long have I been doing comics? I see that comment there. I've been doing comics, well, let's see. I published my first graphic novel in 2009. So let's see, 2009, well, so we're getting close to a decade here. So it's been 9 years. That said, I have been drawing, ever since I was a kid. I had some artwork that even when I was in high school, there was a studio in my local town. That was in the part of California where I grew up in. There's an independent studio that I ended up publishing some work that was really not that great. A lot of people talk about their early comic book work being not particularly impressive and not wanting anyone to see it. I always feel bad because the writer that I worked with, I had two different writers I worked with, one who I'm still really good friends with, one who's a great guy I just kind of lost touch with, but both of them wrote really compelling, interesting ideas. And I don't think that I did their ideas as much justice as they deserve just because I was a young and experienced. All right. I just looked up for a second and my phone said that it had disconnected. I hope that I am back and that you're all able to hear me again. Sorry about that. That goes wonky. If you guys are all able to hear me, that I hope so. That's good. It looks like we're back on. Yeah, so I've been working on comics at this phase of my life for almost a decade, but I've been drawing since I was in high school, like actually drawing comics. A lot of false starts in trying to get to the point where I felt my work was good enough, like I had the actual skills, and I'm still building those skills as I go. Like I always try to describe my videos not as tutorials, but as me sharing my learning process, because even though I'm publishing work, I still feel like I learn more and more about the craft every day. Great to see. I still feel like I'm learning about the craft, both in terms of drawing and writing and inking all of the processes every day that I work on these, and I hope to continue to grow and learn. I think when the stream cut out, I was talking about Morningstar. All right. I don't know why the internet is so pissed at me. The stream keeps cutting out and then cutting back in. I hope that that does not continue to be a problem. This is the first time that this has started to be a problem. But if it does continue to cut in and out, I'm not gonna give up unless it just completely goes out. So if it cuts out, hopefully bear with me and I'll be back on in a second. That said, I apologize for the inconsistency of the stream. Sometimes technology is your friend, sometimes it kicks you in the ass. But look at it this way: how cool is it that like people around the world we can sit and talk while we're drawing and making art? So having the stream occasionally cut out is a small price to pay for something as cool as this experience, being able to talk with you guys and sharing it. So, all right, bummer, but let's hopefully get through it. I realize I'm starting to make this demon too bulky because they're all supposed to be starving and weak. For a little bit of context, what happened in the issue before is better a friend than a horse kicking you in the head. Yes, very true. What I'm drawing right now, American Swordfish asked, I'm drawing a demon that is sort of sad and defeated. First off, it's a weird looking demon. I was showing a little bit earlier. It's a demon that has like one quadruped demon with another more bipedal humanoid demon kind of growing out of its back. Anyway, it was chasing a deer because they're all weak and starving. The deer got away, and now it's kind of sad and defeated and kind of like walking, and the other demons that were hunting also are kind of catching up to it. So this is the opening panel of page 4 of issue 7 of Morningstar. So lots to keep track of in my head. I saw a couple of questions in the chat. Let me roll back here. Dan Federchuk. Why don't you use an interactive display and draw it all directly to file? Well, I do have a small Cintiq. I don't have a large digital display. I have the 12-inch model. But I am in front of a computer all day for my day job. My eyes get tired of being in front of the computer all day, and I like the change of pace. I don't believe that one is necessarily better than the other. Digital is a very powerful tool for drawing comics. I know a lot of artists who do all of their layouts and their pencil, and then they do their rough finishes traditionally. I know artists who do their entire workflow digitally in the computer, and it helps save time and speed them up. If I were not in front of a computer for my day job, I might consider working more digital. But for now, I like being able to get away from the computer just to give my eyes a rest from the monitor, do something a little different. So that's the reason why. It's not that I have anything against digital. I like digital. I use digital for my lettering, as I talked about earlier. So this page, I'm not doing a dynamic with the composition. It's actually very static. We're looking at a side shot of this character, and we're going to be looking at a rear shot of the deer kind of bounding away in the distance. And part of that is that I try to keep shots Like for instance, when there's characters moving towards and away from the camera, I try to save that for more actiony. Excuse me. Like I said, I was getting over a cold. And Dan, you're more than welcome for the answer. I try to save the more dynamic camera angles for shots where people are actively fighting, chasing, yelling, arguing, whatever, when there is some sort of action. And so the idea from going from a dramatic angle where you're kind of coming at the camera to something that's very simple where you're seeing a side view of this and you're seeing the character that he's chasing bounding away from behind, going to a very simple two-dimensional storytelling angle. It's my attempt to convey the calm after something very, very intense. So the camera angles were very excited in terms of how I was laying it out. Yes, thank you for the. He said, "Bless you" for the sneeze. And yeah, so action sequences. I try to get actiony panel angles, and then I try to do calm angles as contrast. That's one of the important things I try to get better at is remembering to create a sense of contrast in my storytelling. To not have everything be a dramatic angle, not have everything be explosions and fights and drama, but to create calm so that when something does happen that's exciting, the reader can kind of feel it, both in the not just in what's happening, but in the way that the panel is constructed. So I'm almost designing it where this area, like dark forest where the demon is, and there's gonna be an area of light that's framing this deer. And okay, this is weird because the stream still seems to be working on my end, but my okay, for a minute it went super blurry on my iPad. So let's see. Oh, I see Chris mentioned there. Yeah, demonic centaur. Yes, that's exactly what I was going for. Yeah, it's kind of a two-headed centaur, and it's funny in doing this series. There's a lot of advantages that I have not. There's a lot of opportunities that I have not taken advantage of in the sense that I've got this fantasy creature. It's got like angels. I've got this fantasy story with angels and demons, and there's sort of like and it's a western. There's all these supernatural things that I really could be pushing the story more. And this is what I say when I speak about the fact that I am still learning. There are probably a lot of ways, like I could have been doing elaborate creature designs for every single page that these creatures appear throughout the entire 8 issues of the series. But only in recent chapters have I gotten, I feel like, enough of a grasp on how I want the creatures to look that I'm experimenting with them and pushing them more. And that's something that we all want everything we draw to be as good as possible, as dynamic as possible. We want it to be interesting, fascinating. We want it to amaze people. We want them to say, "Oh my God, that's so cool that you made that." Yeah, I'm sorry the chat keeps cutting out. That really sucks. All right, I'm back. Um, let's see here. What were the questions? Let's see. Oh yeah, Tammy Hendershot. Yeah, we had a cool curtain effect and Pac-Man-like pixels cascading down. That's what I was seeing on my iPad a minute ago. I looked over and the stream seemed to be working, but it went all blurry and crazy. So I don't know why the internet is pissed at me today. It just is trying to spoil our art party. But try to keep hanging in there. All right, so I'm not sure where it cut off from what I was saying, what I was yammering about, but yeah, I think there's something that can definitely there's a huge advantage if you're doing any particular craft full time where you become really really good at it. And I feel like I still have a tremendous amount to learn. There's techniques I'm trying to do, like having parts of the foreground overlapping the background or the midground, the figures, the action. And there's artists who do it without thinking twice. They know exactly where to place foreground elements so that they don't distract from it. And it's not a particularly complex technique, knowing how to not make your composition cluttered. But when I'm only able to get 1 or 2 hours a day in of doing any actual comic book artwork, those instincts don't get developed as quickly. And that's the thing that it really allows you to make great comics, I believe, is when you've done it enough that you develop instinct. And a great comic artist, or some people are just have more natural talent than others. I mean, that it is true that talent plays a huge part, but the actual practice of the craft leads you to make decisions faster. And I think that that's true of any skill that someone's trying to learn. And the more that you practice. All right. Thank you for bearing with me. Sorry that keeps cutting out. All right. So I was talking about tangents and the idea that you don't want to have a foreground or a background line. You don't want to have a line of one object, let's say this demon's hip, lining up with, like, let's say a tree that's growing out of the background. And and Tammy, thanks. When I first when as soon as I looked up and I saw that it had gone offline again, I was like, damn it. But yeah, tangents. The challenge here, when I've got this composition, it's not particularly complex composition. It's really just, demon, deer, background. But trying to place elements in the foreground like this branch and not have it cut through, not have it run into an object body of the demon that creates a tangent, because I don't like tangents. They mess up the flow. And Kobe, no, it's not you. It is my end. And for some reason, it isn't my Wi-Fi, because I'm actually going off of my phone, off of my cellular data. So it shouldn't be Wi-Fi just being on. And for some reason, even with data, which is usually pretty strong reception in my studio, it still seems to be cutting out regularly. So yeah, I don't know what's going on. This is the first time I've had this problem. But I mean, I've watched other people's live streams and I've seen this problem happen before. I know that it's just working against us. It happens every now and then. It is unfortunate, but we will we'll carry on. Let's see. I sound like I know what you mean when you say I sound like a robot. I have the sound turned off on my iPad here. But when the reception is bad, sometimes the audio comes out very pixelated. It sounds like I'm talking out of a tin can. And yeah, that sucks. Of course, I've been accused of sounding like a robot before. Let's see. Okay. Oh, Dan, you asked whether I would like to see my comics sold in the Ukraine. Well, you can buy my comics internationally on Amazon, and you can buy them on Comixology if you read digitally, and you can also buy them on the Amazon Kindle. So you can get them in the Ukraine. It's why my art's so good. I'm a robot. Well, I would like to think that if I were a robot, my inking would be neater. But maybe I do have a some sort of cybernetic advantage or something. Well, I am a cyborg. I've had LASIK surgery done, so I have been genetically altered to hopefully enhance my art skills. Which is funny. I had the surgery many years ago, and now it's to the point where they tell you that it's only going to last for about a decade, for about 10 years, and now I'm back to wearing glasses again, although my vision is still much better than it was before I got the surgery. Let's see here. I'm curious what got you started. What were the things that you liked in art or in comics that made you want to draw? Let's see. Oh, everyone's given their. You know what? Yeah, well, everybody's in the chat. Go ahead and share with each other how many years you've been drawing for. I'd be curious to see how long you guys have been at it. Um, and let's see. Meanwhile, Alkami asked, "Did I find my comic job successful?" Well, the job really jobs. It was much more that it was a studio that was publishing my work, but I didn't make any money from that. It wasn't a job in the sense that someone hired me to to pay, to work on a specific series. It's more like a group of people were funding the publishing of it, and it was a chance for me as a young person who hadn't, been published before to get my work out there. Can be a lot of criticism towards the idea of doing work for free because there's people that will take advantage of you. And I do think that as somebody who's a working professional, if you have the skill to draw a comic book, a professional looking comic book, people should either pay you for it or you should be doing your own work or collaborating with someone you want to because it's something that you own. Hang on, you're gonna hear my pencil sharpener in the background. Now, I will say that when I was in high school, I did not have the means to publish a comic book. I didn't have the money, and it's much cheaper now to well, I won't say cheaper, but it's much more affordable and realistic to either fund your own comic or to run a Kickstarter and crowdfund it. This was way before. This was back in the '90s when I was in high school, so this was definitely way before Kickstarter. And before people had the money to had platforms to crowdfund their comic books, and at that time, having someone willing to front the money for it and publishing a comic book with a friend of mine, that sounded like a good deal to me. I was happy to do it. So there's not really, no, it wasn't successful in the sense that we made money from it or that we reached a large audience. I would say that it was successful for me in the sense that it was my first chance to actually get work into comic shops and have it, seen by people. Now, true, it's not work that I now feel I'm particularly proud of in terms of the art quality. I mean, it looks like it was drawn by a kid in high school. But that said, I think it was a big step in terms of my personal growth, creating work and seeing that people would value it and pay money for it, even though the sales weren't great. I think it's what gave me the guts to actually eventually go out and self-publish my own work now as an adult. But even my first graphic novel that I published, Eye of the Gods, it was carried by Diamond, and it did ship, but I think only it was the exact like you would carry before they would. It was at the lowest order numbers that Diamond would carry before they would just drop your book and unsolicit it. So I just barely got in. And I think a big part of me getting in was that I found a list online of independent comic friendly retailers. I didn't just call up every comic retailer out there, but I found a list of basically like 100 comic shops that were friendly to independent books. Because some comic shops, even if they like independent comics, their customers only buy Marvel and DC. And as much as they would like to carry indie comics, maybe the only indie comic they can carry is something that's still really large, like a Hellboy or Sin City or something like that. So I contacted about 100 stores, and I would just call, like on my lunch break, I would call maybe like 5 or 10 stores a day and just tell them my book is in Diamond catalogs. It's in previews this in whatever month it was coming out, and would it be okay for me to send them a physical copy of the book so they can see if it's something they'd want to. And some people would call these shops. And in the end, it didn't light the comic industry on fire. There were no reorders. I still continue to sell the book at conventions, but so far I would say that I haven't had what someone would call making a living with these because I can't not make comics. This is the form of art that makes me the happiest to practice. So this is what I do full time, and then I can do the stuff I was talking about earlier, where I said, you know, developing my skills to the point where I don't have to think about how to draw this or how to draw that. They just become instinct. And I can think about, I can focus on the story, what I want to say instead of how to say it. So that is something that I'm constantly trying to strive to get closer to in terms of my skill set, both in terms of writing and art. Now, as I'm drawing this, I realize I'm gonna have to experiment with the size of this deer because I want it to read as a deer. But if this is the size of the demon, and as I showed in a previous page, let's see here, the demon being this small, if it's bounding off into the distance, it should actually be pretty tiny. So I'm gonna have to figure out exactly how small I can make this and have it still read. And that's a bit of a challenge. I saw another question there, and I'm going to get to that in a second. Let me see here. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of people saying that you've been doodling since Tam. Yes, you've been doodling since you were a kid, started painting as a teen, researched how to draw comics. Oh, awesome. Well, you know what? I'm glad that you found my channel, and I'm happy to have you watching. Let's see. Okay. And Alkami, I'm happy to answer your questions, and I apologize if I'm butchering the pronunciation of your name. It's one of the things that I'm finding challenging as a newer YouTuber is when I'm interacting with people from across the world and not having the ability to properly pronounce names from different cultures. So I apologize if I butcher your name. I see Eric Rizzo there. Hey, good to see you, man. Let's see. And Tammy, you also asked about world building. How such things as character and creature design have changed over the course of comics. Do I have any advice regarding world building? Things I've learned. All right. Advice for world building. Well, I still feel like world building is something that I am learning more about. I'd say that reference is very, very useful. Reference is useful in the sense that the way that I've taken classes in studying animation, and I took a class specifically on prop and character design for an artist, Will Weston. He teaches at Art Center in California, in Pasadena. And he also has been a background artist or environmental artist for many animation programs, including, I believe, Legend of Korra, if not the original Avatar. I think Legend of Korra is the one that he worked on. But he's a great instructor. One of the things that he showed us was that for a lot of animation programs, you know, they would go on research trips, and let's say that they're doing something in Far East, and doing something that's based in China or some other part of the world, that and just go around and just take photos of all sorts of little details that you wouldn't necessarily see if you just looked at a guidebook or if you looked up on Google Earth. Like, they would just walk around, they'd be walking through interesting buildings and just taking photos of doorknobs and hinges and light fixtures and taking pictures of all of these little details. And they would basically build a library, copy that exact light fixture, but they would look at, let's say that there's a lantern that's hanging in the alley of this this particular city in an animated story that they're building the world of. They might say, well, how can we add something that feels like it's from this culture, or if pieces does it have? And let's say it's a science fiction story that takes place in China. They might say, well, how do we combine the high tech with the ancient and trying to combine those two different feels? And that's where reference really comes in handy, is when you look at the reference, but then turn it into something else. Like maybe how do you take something, maybe it's something where you look at like something in contemporary China and it looks old and beaten up and you see this old rusty lantern and you say, well, what would that look like if it were brand new? What would that look like if it were made today and it had different paint on it and had different color and it looked new and fresh? And then you get that sense that like that thing that you saw in real life that was really, really old, what it might feel like if it were brand new. And those are sort of the interesting ways in which reference can really help you. Now, one of the things that I also try to remember is I don't want the reference to guide the story, because there's a possibility with anything, whether it's writing or in visual development, where you can spend all of your time researching and spend no time actually the thing you want to make, because research and world building can be very, it's like drawing in a sketchbook. You can spend all of your time drawing in a sketchbook and it's so enjoyable that you may not move on to making finished pieces. And if all you want to do is sketch ideas, there's nothing wrong with that. But if your goal is to eventually make a finished product, a story, an animated film, a comic book, an illustrated novel, you want the things that you make to help move you closer to creating the thing that you're trying to describe. So one of the things that I plan to experiment with in the series I do after Morningstar, and it's too soon for me to really tell you much about it because I'm still writing it and I'm still working out some of the details. But what I want is to wait until I have thumbnailed out a lot of the story already before going back and doing character designs, because in the past I have found that I've done a bunch of character designs and then tried to draw the comic and make the character fit in with those designs. Whereas if I were to storyboard out a sequence or thumbnail out a chapter from a comic, and I have the character and they pull out their sword, and I see the way that they use the sword in the thumbnails, and I draw the action in the story first. Sometimes seeing, so I'm kind of trying to open myself to this idea of doing the story first and then building the character to match the story. Um, Plot heavy. If you're so focused on the plot and you don't create a compelling character, the story can come out really, really flat because you don't care about the person who's going through these adventures. So you have to design, not just in story, not just visually, but also in terms of writing. You have to design a character that people are going to care about. But I think that for me, as somebody who's more of a story first person, I'm more of a plotter, that I need to, the way I figure out how the character should be is kind of by sculpting what's going to be the most interesting person to be interacting with these events. So I'm kind of going back and forth with that, with world building. My point being is that grabbing a bunch of reference and having stuff to look at visually and in terms of like writing as well, that can help with your world building. It's just having a ton of reference and then just opening your mind and opening your sketchbook and doing as many iterations as possible. Like, even though this is it's not world building in the sense of creating a Morningstar. See this page. Like for the next 6, like I'll sit there and I'll draw like 4 different sketches of what I want a creature to look like or the pose how I want them reacting. I think that thumbnail is valuable for world building because you just sit there and instead of trying to create the right thing, you just create a version of it and then another version and then another version. And you may end up drawing like 5 or 10 different sketches, and out of those 5 or 10 different sketches, you may find a little bit here and a little bit there that you grab from each of the sketches and you combine them to make that final concept, that final character, or that building, or that vehicle that has exactly what you want. So iteration is something that a lot of people talk about. Iteration, I think, is very handy for world building. Just drawing a ton of stuff and then pulling out those pieces and reforming them into something that really captures what you're looking for. Let's see. And Eric Rizzo, I'm glad you're enjoying the stream. Let's see. All right. At this point, he looks like a fox with those big ears. So neck, that long, elegant neck that deers have, and that's the tough thing. It's so small. It's hard to convey in this tiny little creature. It's funny from here. As tiny as this is, its head, to me, kind of reminds me of Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, because from the back, this is kind of the shape of the deer's head. I don't know. It's pretty light. It's hard to see, and I'm just drawing it there just so you can see. It's something stupid, but that's the tiny little head that I'm drawing right here. Oh, let's see. Put some rocks in here to try and create a sense of depth. I will tell you, I am surprised that my cats are being as well behaved, because my wife and I, we have 2 cats, Kachu and Khaleesi. And normally whenever I am on the computer or when I'm at the drawing table, they always like to just stick their heads in and see what I'm doing, and they complain that I'm not playing with them, they meow, and they bring their cat toys. And they're actually being very well behaved, because I was very prepared for them to just be in here and trying to ruin the... But no, he's talked to some people, he's got something going on, we'll let him be. So they're being well behaved. They're being good kitties. Pardon me for a second, I have to blow my nose. All right, let's see here. You know, I am actually doing exactly what I try not to do. And I think that, well, what I try not to do is just sit and draw one panel, finish it, and then draw the next panel and finish it. What I like to do usually is to draw very loosely in each pattern, like start with just stick figures and then flesh out the whole panel and kind of develop the whole page together. Because sometimes I'll get pretty far into a panel, I'll add a lot of details and get it almost finished, and then something I draw down here will make me say, oh wait, I need to set that up better in one of the earlier panels, and I end up having to go back and erase all this hard work. I find it's easier storytelling wise if I can work through the whole page, develop it at the... So let's see here. I can see the stream's getting blurry. I wish that this was a little more consistent. I wish it was giving you the whole... Sure, if it's just my general Wi-Fi in the house that's being crappy, or... Well, like I said, I'm broadcasting from my cellular, so I don't know why it's so crappy. All right. Yeah, I think I was just starting to add more details and work on that one drawing. Things about live streaming. While I'm drawing, I end up a lot of times not necessarily thinking things through. And yes, I am unfortunately still sick. I was really sick leading up to Phoenix Comic-Con a few weeks ago. I went to that. I got better right before I came back. And I came back and I was sick last weekend, and just, I'm not getting enough sleep. That's really what it comes down to. And I've mentioned before about health and rest and exercise. It's one of the things, it's really hard to make art if you aren't healthy. And healthy isn't also enough exercise and enough sleep. Or I don't get enough sleep. One of the first thing that happens is I usually catch a cold. And unfortunately, I see Joel there. Hello, man. How you doing? Um, Joining us in the chat. I One of the things is that whenever I try to get exercise in, I usually like to get up in the morning before work and go for a bike ride or go for a walk or do some light weightlifting. But I have to get up early to do that. And a lot of times that means I end up losing an hour of sleep. And if I do that for a few days, then I'm like running low on sleep and I'm only getting like 5 or 6 hours instead of 7 or 8 hours. And once I'm not getting enough sleep, then I start getting sick again. And so the cycle seems to keep continuing where I'm either not getting enough sleep, not getting enough exercise, or I'm not getting enough artwork done. Sometimes I'll just come home and I'm never drained creatively. I never have days where I'm just like, oh, I just don't feel like drawing. There's days when I know I should not draw because I want to draw. If I let myself, I'll end up staying up way too late and end up, getting sick again. So I have to choose. Well, do I want to, be healthy, get some rest, or do I want to make art? But it's not usually that I don't feel like drawing. It's more like I have to force myself to rest. Because that's the funny thing I joke about with my wife is that artwork is like coffee to me. If I sit down and draw, it wakes me up. I become alert and excited and energized. And I don't get to use as many hours in the day for making artwork as I should because say that if I'm going to go to bed at 11 p.m., I have to force myself to stop drawing an hour beforehand because I can't just stop drawing and go to sleep. If I try to go after I finish drawing, my mind is awake and excited, and I'm thinking about the things I'm drawing. I'm thinking about new things that I want to draw and ideas. And I need to give my brain time to relax and settle into a non-drawing state. Usually that ends up being reading. That's what I will do is I'll sit down with the book. So I've been getting caught up in my reading because for love reading. It's one of the reasons why I like comic books because I can combine storytelling with art. Those are the two things that I love the most. But over recent years, I've kind of fallen off in terms of I have not been reading as much as I'd like. So I'm starting to get back into that, both to improve as a writer, also for entertainment, and then also just to help me relax and unwind to get my mind into a state where I can fall asleep and get a decent amount of rest. See, now I'm talking about sleep and I'm getting tired. Let's see. Tammy, you mentioned I've had to force myself to let go of detail at certain stages. Found it somewhat inhibiting. Yes, when I was in college, I was a painting major, and I used to do these very detailed paintings. Sometimes they were creatures, sometimes they were, I can't even remember. I drew all sorts of weird, crazy shit. They tended to be very, very hyper detailed, and a lot of that was coming from being a comic book fan and looking at a lot of work like Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee. Comic books have a lot of detail and hatching and cross hatching, and those were works that were very much an influence on me. I grew up in the age of like the first wave of image comic books back in the 90s, the early 90s. So those artists were very, very influential on me. And so a lot of my artwork tended to be hyper detailed. And I found that I was sitting trying to do these very large paintings, or large for me. It wasn't massive. They were more like 2 foot by 3 foot paintings, which for for someone who's used to just working on A4 or working on like 11 by 17 inch pieces, it was definitely a new experience moving up to painting on canvas and painting larger. And I found that these paintings, I would just be working on them forever and I would just get sick of it. And so at a certain point, I just started moving to doing very, very simple pieces. And I felt like like you said, Tammy, it is liberating to not force yourself to make everything super detailed. You look at someone like Mike Mignola with Hellboy, and he makes very beautiful, compelling artwork, but it doesn't have to be super detailed. Starting with this demon kind of defeated, deer kind of running off in the background. And so in this panel, the demon is now, the centaur demon is defeated and hanging its head. The quadruped part of it is actually laying down, and the humanoid part is hunched over. And because there were other demons in earlier pages chasing the deer before the centaur sort of picked up the trail, these other demons are going to be coming running from behind. Very tiny thumbnail. And I have to actually write in the thumbnails what these pictures are, because you probably may not even be able to tell what these pictures are. But this picture right here is supposed to be the centaur demon kind of squat down, and there's two more demons that are coming running from behind. And this was me doing a slightly more detailed drawing of what the hunched over centaur would look like on the back of the quadruped. See here. Yeah, I think the challenge I'm having is just working out the perspective and the proportion. I know I want it to be a low horizon. If you hear little meows in the background, that's my girl Khaleesi, a little cat. She is now under the drawing table, keeping my feet warm. Yeah, Tammy. Yeah, for thumbnails, my idea is like you mentioned about details inhibiting you. I try to make the thumbnails so simple that I can't get lost in detail. Because like you said, or like I said before, you'll focus on drawing just one particular good picture, but that picture doesn't necessarily add up to making the whole story better. And that is something that I'm trying to think of, is not just what makes this drawing a good drawing, but I'm more than willing to sacrifice a good panel to make a good page. Your cat has taken over your lap, holding on my keyboard with one constantly. They love to chew on any type of computer cable or cord. Let's see. Oh, here's something that I wanted to share with you, because I'm always, as I said, I'm always tweaking my process and I'm learning new things. And there is something that I wanted to share with you guys, because I think this might actually be helpful. So, like I said, I do all of these ink thumbnails based on my outline before I start going into layouts. So, this was the opening page of the issue that I'm working on. And when I started drawing this page, I don't worry about the response. I have to remember to go back every few minutes and check the chat to see if people ask new questions or said anything, because I'm slow on the response because I get on a roll talking or rambling, or I'm just drawing and I lose focus. So We're all just having fun here talking about art. Let me see. Where is the thumbnail for page 1? All right. So in my thumbnail for page 1, there's the deer coming out of the woods, and to the left, looks to the right, then in silhouette kind of dips its head down to drink from the water. Of that from the thumbnails because they're so simple. All right, there we go. So, as I was saying, the problem that I was having when I was drawing this first panel was that I am not great with landscapes. I've been meaning to want to do landscape or plein air drawing and painting to improve my skills. But one of the things that I learned from, I had mentioned Will Weston before in the class I'd taken with him on environmental drawing for animation. And the idea is that when you're doing a layout, it's really like you're doing a landscape for, I also took an environmental drawing class. And I think Will Weston's class was on prop design and layout. The environmental design class was a class I took with John Messer. I think I've mentioned him in some of my other videos. And I learned a lot about landscape and environment drawing from him as well. But both of those classes were excellent. But in a way, I'm combining the things I've learned from the two different instructors, which is funny because I've got instructors I've learned environment and perspective from, prop and character design, taking classes with just one class with Will Weston, taking the class with John Messer. I continue to take figure drawing classes and anatomy classes with an instructor named Carl Ganas, who also has a YouTube channel. I don't, even with just those 3 instructors I've mentioned there, I've taken classes over the years with many different instructors, and I think it's great to study with as many different as possible, not just learning different subjects, but also seeing how different instructors teach the same subject, because some things will click. Some things will click with one instructor that don't necessarily click with another in terms of the way that they explain stuff, where like those light bulbs will go off. All right, that was when I stopped the page I was working on. I did some on the side for this environment, and I just tried to work out what was going to be the pattern of light and dark in this landscape. So these aren't meant to be detailed drawings. They aren't meant to be pretty nice drawings. They're meant for me to simply understand composition, the sky, the earth, the river. How dark did I want the river to be in comparison to the sky, the earth, the how much of the shadow was going to black it out. And I realized in doing that, once I had something that felt like a nice landscape drawing, then I could simply place the figure, and the figure being the deer, into that environment. Now that helped me through this page, but something that I hadn't been doing before is doing a second set of thumbnails. Now, normally when I do these thumbnails, I draw them in ink with a brush in order to keep my practice up sort of inking with a brush. It's like any other skill, you need to keep it doing it regularly. But as I went through and I drew, where's page 2? Okay. The demon slashing at the deer's flank. I ended up doing the other rough sketches. These, instead of doing them in brush, because I was kind of doing them while working on the layouts at the same time, I just did them in Sharpies, just a black marker. And these are probably the same type of thumbnails that I would do in brush and ink and working out the story. But the reason why I didn't do additional drawings is because this was only so I could form the framework of the story. This is all about storytelling. And I might do a couple of different versions to try and figure out what pose I want for the page, but they aren't really related to the actual. I found that for me, doing additional thumbnails as I'm drawing the layouts to work out the details of the pose, it's like I was going back and forth between layout and thumbnail. And so an extra stage to help me figure out exactly what I want on the pose. In the past, I would simply, in the stage where I'm doing it in red, I would just draw and erase and draw and erase and draw and erase. And sometimes it went quickly, sometimes it was a sloppy mess. But I found that doing a few extra doodles on the side for these additional pages, it kind of helped me work through some of that mess so that I could get to what I want. And so that was what I wanted to share and why I stopped drawing the page. I mentioned that only because as I'm going through and drawing here, working out the perspective, the thumbnail I did kind of covered exactly what I wanted. So, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I just realized I messed up here. This panel that I'm trying to cram into I'm trying to cram this shot, this tiny thumbnail of like the centaur demon and the two coming up. I'm trying to cram it into one panel here, when what I look at my thumbnails and I have a little note down at the bottom to try and split the second pier, so it's one image but split into two panels. It's an old trick that I've seen in a lot of comics. Frank Miller is probably the one I experienced it the most with. Simonson, but I'm sure he invented it. I think it's something that's probably been around in comics for many, many years. But the idea of doing a panel that is one image, but it's broken into two panels. So this shot with the demons running up to see what's happening, instead of trying to cram it, it's all this stuff. That's difficult for me while I'm live streaming because sometimes I'm not paying attention to my notes or the storytelling as well. So I miss little details that I should be paying attention to. This is one big image. It's broken into two panels, but the shot of the centaur demon should be here. The other two demons running up. Let's keep this angle low. Let's see. Over here. And one of the challenges I'm having in this issue in general, in this chapter, is that these demons are supposed to be emaciated and they're weak, they're hungry, they're starving. And I am trying to keep that feel of making them look like monsters, but also make them look emaciated and drained. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So this is what I mean when I say that I try to rough in the whole thing instead of getting caught up in details. Like that's something right there that like if I had sat there and really rendered the hell out of that, I would be very, not upset, but I'd be bummed that I had to erase that drawing that I put a lot of time into. Let's see here. Let's see. We are coming up on 80 minutes, although it hasn't been 80 minutes of consistent because the stream has kept dropping off and beyond for about 90 minutes. So I am probably only going to be on for another 10 minutes or so. So just giving you a heads up so I don't want to be like a surprise. I'm like, click bye. So if you guys have any other questions, wow, that stream just conked out again. Sorry about that. I am sorry this has been so inconsistently crappy. Yeah, I'm even looking at it on my YouTube and all right, there it cleared up a little bit, but it was super pixelated and I was just like, no one can see anything. This is horrible. It's not a live stream, it's a live trickle. Excuse me. A little cough there. Yeah, Centaur is too big in comparison. And actually, yeah, I feel like I really want to fill up this panel a little bit more. Make this guy feel bigger. I may have to move some of these word balloons around in order to convey the feeling that I want. Because I want this guy. He did when he was facing the deer, even though it's just him and. Let's see here. Yeah, this little guy, make him feel a little bit more. Make him feel smaller, more defeated. Okay. Okay, and Tammy, thanks for the comment. I'm really glad to hear that that even with the video dropping out, that the audio has been decent, and that for the most part, you can see. Yeah, I figure it's not the same as being able to actually have you here in the studio with me at the drawing board, but I do want it to be as clear as possible, and it does bum me out when I can't make it the best quality experience for you guys since you're taking the time out of your day, another thing, time with me, talking about art and comics. I really appreciate that. Let's see here. It's so odd. The chat. All right, there we go. Yeah, the chat disappeared for a second on the iPad. Now it's back. All right. Let's see here. Now, so I've kind of got these two figures. I haven't really worked out their pose yet in terms of what I want, but I also want to start locking in on them. Like, how are they going to be framed? So I imagine there's going to be trees kind of framed because he's going to be a large, dark shape. There's gonna be trees over here. Create a sense of like depth by saying that there's bushes over here in between where the centaur has fallen and where these two guys, these two demons, are running to catch up with them and see what happens. They're still sort of like hoping that the deer has been caught. So they gotta figure, well, if one of us got him, missed him, two of us missed him. Well, this the third guy. Let's see, yeah. So it's really just gonna be framing these characters. Trees, tangles of trees in the background. Excuse me. Yeah. Instead of getting too lost in this panel, let's move on. Let's see. So, okay, see, this is something interesting. One of these demons is supposed to have horns. Didn't draw them in the previous pages with horns. This is a nice thing to. Okay. So, let's see. Oh yeah, so the demon that's down here at the bottom is going to be staring path like, what the hell, man? I thought you were going to catch him. So I thought you were going to catch him. That's not the actual, there's no real dialogue. This is all a very silent. And there's a little part where like when demons, the two demons when they're running up a very broken, and then the centaur is just like too weak, too hungry. He's just too tired to pull it off. You couldn't chase him down. And then they just are both. That's what in this in my thumbnails, you've got this demon falling on his knees, going no. You know, he's just they're starving, and they had a chance to catch some food, and they failed. And it's a little melodramatic. These demons are a little bit of a wuss. This is almost me playing the demons for comedic effect here. You know, lightening it up a little bit. Yeah, for a lot of these in the layouts, I'm trying to start with just blocking in. Like basically, I'm just redrawing my thumbnail at a proper anatomy for this page. What is the proper perspective to try and make it something where it's not just an indecipherable scratch or scribble like these thumbnails are, but to create something that gives a sense of depth, of story, environment, drama. So I'm trying to work all of those things into the page so that hopefully when people are actually reading the story, they will find it compelling and interesting. They'll care about what's happening. I mean, this is all storytelling. Comics are kind of like magic. You're creating this illusion of a moment, of a world. You know, you're creating people on paper and hopefully breathing life into them. Ah, the cat's is trying to eat some binder clips. Not eat, but just gnaw on, chew on them. Because they do that. They're just, whenever they want attention, they like to come over and gnaw on whatever I'm working on. Because they're like, hey, you're sitting there doing stuff, buddy. You're not hanging out with us. Let's see here. All right. Uh-oh, I see trouble. So one of the cats that I mentioned, Khaleesi, she is trying to leap onto my drawing. She's right here. This is Khaleesi. She was sitting and she wanted to leap over. Yeah, sometimes I wonder. It's like artists, cats tend to go well with artists and writers, and it's weird because whenever with artists. Okay, yeah. So as I was saying, my drawing table isn't flat, it's at an angle, it's angled up like this. And what'll happen is Khaleesi will look at my drawing board. She'll be standing, there's a desk just to the side of my drawing table where my computer is. She will stand on that desk and look at me while I'm drawing, and then she will leap over and jump on the table, but then she immediately slides offward, slides down because it's at an angle. And I was afraid she'd hop on here and unfortunately possibly clop some of the drawings while I'm trying to get work done. Okay. All right. So I've been on for about 90 minutes. I wanted to say thank you to everyone that's been with me through the stream, and thank you for putting up with the inconsistent video and it cutting out. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your thoughtful questions. I appreciate you spending time with me on your weekend. So hopefully you found this interesting, maybe a little bit inspiring. Hopefully you guys are being productive and creating some cool artwork on your own. So have a great rest of the weekend, and go be creative.